All right, everyone. I think it's time to get started. Thanks again for calling in today and spending your Monday night with us. We have a lot of great stuff that we want to share with you today, and I hope that you get a lot out of this. But yeah, let's get started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Kengo Nagaoka. My role here at the Alaska Center is Youth Civic Engagement Coordinator. And I'll be helping facilitate today's webinar. I hope that after this webinar, you get a better idea of what's going on with the legislature down in Juneau, and also find some ways that you can get your voice heard with things that are going down there. Before we start, I just want to make a quick land acknowledgement. I am calling in from Dena'ina land here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I want to acknowledge that stewardship of the land here. Like I said, my name is Kengo Nagaoka. I go by he, him pronouns. And I'm the Youth Civic Engagement Coordinator here at the Alaska Center. I am going to be presenting my screen, so I'm just going to switch over to the slides so I can start that up here. Alrighty, I hope that you all can see the slides that I'm presenting right here. Well, welcome to Legislative Session 101. This is our first one that we're doing this year. If this goes well, we might be doing some more as we go forward. Yep, so let me go over the agenda for today. First off, we're going to be doing a 2018 elections recap. And Carly Dennis will be presenting on this and how the results are going to be impacting Alaskans. Then we'll be moving on to Alaska's legislative, how a bill becomes a law with Jody Sparks. Then Alyssa Quinton will be leading a Build Your Voice training and connecting with your elected leaders. And Griffin Plush will be helping us stay involved in what's going on and how to follow the legislative session as it goes on. Just some tech things before we start. If you have any questions, we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end. If you could type your questions in the chat box on the right, we'll get to your questions at the very end today. If you're on the phone, you'll have a chance to unmute and ask a question if you'd like to at the very end. Also, we are recording this webinar for folks to look at later. If you don't want your face to be shown, you can turn off your video. I think that's it for the intro. Thanks again for joining us, and now I'll pass it on to Carly Dennis. Take it away, Carly.
Great. Hey, everybody. I'm Carly Dennis. I'm calling in from LA right now. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a former youth trainer with the Alaska Center, and I've worked with the Alaska Center in a couple different roles and capacities, and spent a semester down in Juneau last year interning in the legislature. And so I'll just be going over the 2018 elections recap, because obviously we did recently just have some pretty big elections that really changed the way our state looks. And so before we even get into how your voice can make an impact, we're just going to walk through what's been going on. Great. So the first big thing that has changed is obviously we have a new governor. For the past few years, we've had Governor Bill Walker, who was an independent, but in November, voters chose to elect Governor Mike Dunleavy, who is a Republican. You can see on the bottom the voting margin. He won by a fair amount. Some of his priorities that he's going to be looking at during this legislative session and for the next few years include crime, like cutting SB 91, in case you've heard of that in the news, restoring a full PFD to Alaskans, a full dividend. Some of the proposals he's put forward even include back funding PFDs or returning money to Alaskans that may have been cut by previous legislatures or previous governors. He really wants to reduce budget. And so he's already proposed quite a few cuts to Alaska's budget, cuts affecting education and public safety, in order to try and really reduce the amount the state is spending. And he's really big on resource development and jobs. So you'll probably hear quite a bit about putting Alaskans back to work. He wants to reinvigorate the mining sector, natural resource sectors, big on oil, things like that. And Governor Dunleavy doesn't have quite as many ways that he can be affected by the public, us, but he's certainly really an important part of the process of making a bill become a law. And so Jody will talk a little bit more about that. But in addition to him signing off on bills, obviously he's always really worried about getting reelected and constituent relations. And so he actually does have an office in his office, or people in his office, who are dedicated to listening to constituent concerns. And so anytime he does anything, anytime he puts out a new budget or creates a proclamation, you can always totally call his office and let them know. And even though there's not necessarily fixed process by law that he has to listen to his constituents, he, will usually be concerned about these things. Great. Okay. So obviously the other big piece that changed in the last election cycle was the Alaska State Legislature. And part of the Alaska State Legislature is the state Senate. So as you can see, we have 20 senators. And you can see here kind of the breakdown of all the different senators from each district and what party they are. And the Senate is pretty solid and not very, it's not really fluctuating this legislative term like the House is. There are 14 Republican senators and 16 Democratic senators. And it's split pretty much down those lines. And this means that there's not a lot of tight votes in the Senate. Things mostly will go to the Republican caucus or the Republican group of senators who hold control. And so there's usually not quite as much to be worked out, to be scabbled over or argued over. It's usually pretty clean cut. The one thing that we are going to highlight, though, is in the past election cycle, past November, District A was one of the districts that actually flipped. So Scott Kawasaki was elected in Fairbanks, but the seat was previously held by Pete Kelly, who was a Republican senator and was actually Senate president. So the switch from Republican to Democrat in that district was really consequential and really interesting. And even though it didn't change up to make it the Senate, it's still a good one to take note of. Great. So the Alaska House is way more fun and interesting. Right now we have the same breakdown of all of the representatives by representative district. And like before, the red are the Republicans and the blue are the Democrats. But it's a much closer margin in the Alaska House right now. And so there's quite a few districts that are interesting to us. We'll start with District 1. This was also in Fairbanks, actually. This district was won in November by Bart LeBon, a Republican, and it was won with a single vote. So one single person had the power to decide between the Democrat, Catherine Dodge, who lost, and the Republican, Bart LeBon, who won. And this was a really contended election that was drawn out and brought to court, and finally decided that Bart LeBon did have it. So that was just another note on the importance of voting. Another important seat to note is down in District 15, Gabrielle Ledoux. She won re-election, so the district didn't flip, it stayed red. But she's an important member to take note of because she is one of the few Republicans that does not caucus with other Republicans, meaning she doesn't vote with other Republicans necessarily. In the past, she's actually been aligned with Democrats. And we'll talk a little bit more about the makeup of caucuses in a moment. But then going down the list, District 22, that was another district that kind of flipped. Sarah Rasmussen won the election for that district, and she beat Jason Grenn. And Jason Grenn was an independent. So previously, he actually did caucus with the Democrats as well. So that district has turned a little bit more red in the past months. In District 30, going down, Gary Knopp He won re-election. So again, this district didn't flip, but he's another one of the Republicans that isn't necessarily going to align with the rest of the Republicans, making for an interesting organization. District 31, that's kind of Homer down on the Kenai Peninsula. This was another district that kind of flipped because Sarah Vance beat Paul Seaton, and Paul Seaton was similar to Gren and Ledoux. He was one of those kind of nonpartisan or Republicans who caucused with the Democrats. So Sarah Vance will probably be aligning with the Republicans, making this more of a red district now. And then finally, in District 32, that's Kodiak, Louise Stutes won re-election. So she's in the same place as before, and she's another one of those weird Republicans that doesn't necessarily align with the Republicans. So as you can see, there's a lot of districts that either change to become a little bit more red or stayed in control of Republicans who are not necessarily going to work with other Republicans, which is important for this next slide. Thank you, Kengo. So right now, there are 20 Republicans. There's 40 overall, 40 representatives. 20 of those representatives are Republicans who are willing to work with other Republicans. So they're in the Republican caucus, and the caucus is just a group made up of members who are willing to work together and willing to take control of the House if they can. There's 19 people who want to join a bipartisan caucus. So there's not actually 19 Democrats, but there's 19 Democrats and Republicans and one single independent who will work together, who want to take control and create some kind of bipartisan coalition like they had last legislative session. And then there's one person, that is Gary Knopp, who doesn't want either of those things. He has traditionally been a Republican, but this year he thinks that having a Republican caucus with only 21 people in it would be too weak. So he doesn't want to align himself with them. He wants to build kind of a different caucus, perhaps with more Democrats and Republicans evenly split, perhaps something else. But either way, he doesn't want to join either of those above caucuses. And because of this, the Alaska State House is still unorganized. So there's no single group of people that have control. They're still negotiating. They're still trying to figure out who can be Speaker of the House, for example. They have a temporary Speaker of the House was elected, Neil Foster, who's a Democrat from rural Alaska. But they don't have any real set concrete organization. And because of that, they can't be passing any bills yet. They can't form committees. And so right now, the whole Alaska House is kind of at a standstill, waiting for these negotiations to happen. So that is kind of the state of the legislature. Senate is set to go, and Alaska State House is kind of in disarray. But as soon as the Alaska State House becomes organized, knowing how to interact with the representatives will be really important. And I think now we'll take a quick minute before we move on to the next section to maybe pull up a map of all the districts. Kengo, I think, is going to try and put in a link for us. But essentially, if you don't know who your senator and your representative are, it's really easy to look it up. We'll drop this link into the chat box as soon as I'm done, and perhaps email it out, not sure. But basically, you can see all the districts. You can click on where you live, and it'll show you. So, for instance, if you're living in downtown Anchorage here, where we're zooming in, you can just click on the neighborhood you live in, and it'll show you your senator and your representative. And from there, it's really easy to be able to interact with them, to contact them. We'll get a little bit more into that a bit later. But essentially, that's all I have for the layout of the land, lay of the land. And if there's any questions, of course, type them into the chat box.
Thanks, Carly. Do you mind putting that link into the chat box?
I'll do that right now.
Great. All right, I am going to hand it off to Jody then.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Jody Sparks, and I'll be talking about how a bill becomes a law today, our legislative process. Next slide, please. So just to start off, the reason that I hope I feel equipped to talk about this is some of the experience on here. So for 3 years during high school, I went with Alaska Youth for Environmental Action, a program of Alaska Center, to the legislature and advocated, which you'll be hearing a lot more about later. I spent a summer organizing for Cook Inlet Keeper, especially on the Stand for Salmon ballot initiative. Spent a summer in Murkowski's office as an intern. The most important thing on here, though, is I spent a lifetime as an Alaskan, and I feel like that's the most important thing when it comes to advocating for things you care about and talking to your legislators. And also, I watch a lot of West Wing, which is a great political show, but by no means something that we need to aim for the level of politicaling they do in that. And by the way, my pronouns are he, him. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the process fairly quickly. I'm hoping this is more of a crash course rather than an in-depth view of it. But I have a few slides here about the flow. And the pictures here are the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, because those are the people who are involved in passing the laws and signing them and passing the bills and then signing them into law. And the House and the Senate are, of course, together, and both must agree on the law. And then the governor can veto it or sign it into law, or allow it to become a law. And so the governor has a lot more individual power than any member of either body. Next slide. And then the one branch of government that wasn't on that slide is the Supreme Court. And while they aren't as important when it comes to advocacy, they are important because they have the ability to strike down laws or alter laws that don't follow our Constitution. Next slide. One more click. And could you click one more time? I like this animation, and I'm sure we'll be sending these out too, but it gives just a really basic idea of what the flow is, and it kind of does it in a prettier way than the next slide will. The most important thing here to me is in the middle, which is the light bulb, because the law that will move through the legislature starts out as an idea, and it could start out as an idea a legislator has or an idea that the governor has, and that is the most common way. But it could also be an idea that any one of us have, or anyone who is here to help out the state and has good ideas for it. Next slide, please. And if you could, yeah, awesome. This is the less pretty but easier to follow steps in the passage of a bill. And I'm not going to go through it step by step. You're welcome to read it afterwards, and I'd recommend reading it afterwards. But I would like to touch on what I feel is the most important section of it, which is the committee. So it's in the early stages of it. When a bill has just been introduced, it'll head to committee, and that's where the meat of the bill will really be decided for the most part. The committees include things like they just deal with different sections of the state, and they're similar to the departments of the executive branch. So we have a committee that deals a lot with our natural resources, and one that deals with oil, one that deals with fish. We have a committee that deals with our education system, things like that. And you personally, I've called in, you can call in, you can go to the legislature, you can submit comments, but the committee is a really important place because legislators can make changes, or they can pass a bill, or they can let a bill die there. Next slide, please. And I included this slide here just because the numbers on it I think are really striking. So if a bill passes in the normal way where it goes through legislature and then is signed into law, it only takes a total of 33 people agreeing to this idea in order for it to become the law of the land. And 33 people is not a lot of people. And especially in Alaska, those 33 people have other people to listen to, but not nearly as many as in other states. And obviously you folks know that, and that's why you're here that's why you're here learning some skills for advocacy. But those 33 people, any one of them, if they can be influenced along the way, you can help a bill pass, or you can stop a bad bill from being passed. The bottom part of this is if the governor is not going to sign a bill, which I won't make any predictions, but we might be seeing some of that in the coming session, based on the relationship that the governor has to the legislature. But we'll see. But it's still only 41 legislators can pass a bill on their own without the governor signing it. Next slide. I included this slide to remind myself and everyone that this part of the presentation is probably not going to come up when you're talking to your legislature, talking to your legislator. I've been to Juneau a few times, and not once has someone stopped me in like the hall of the Capitol and quizzed me about the legislative process. So this isn't something that, if you don't know exactly how a bill works its way through the system, you won't be able to add your voice to the process. It's a good thing to know, but the important thing is that you're adding your voice at whatever step you can, and that you're helping make Alaska a better place. And that's my last slide, so I'll pass it off. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Jody and Carly, for sharing your wisdom. If we could show some appreciation for Carly and Jody, please show your thanks in the chat box. If you could give him a thank you, that would be really appreciated. But I am going to hand it off to Alyssa. Go for it.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Quinton. Like Kingo mentioned, I am here right up here in the interior in Fairbanks, Alaska. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the interior organizer with the Alaska Center, and I just wanted to take a little bit of time to acknowledge that up here in Fairbanks, I wanted to acknowledge that we are on Chena Dene, or Lower Tanana people's lands, and so I wanted to uplift and celebrate that stewardship as well. And what I hope to bring to you in this training is to give you and provide you all the information of all the different avenues that you have to engage with your legislators and your governors, and to cheer you on as you make your strides in whatever is going to be working for you. And you can go roll through these little note cards we have in the next slide. But essentially, what we're going to cover in this section is the folks that need to hear from you, all the different ways that you can share your voice, the places that you can be heard, the impact of why it's so important, and any tips and important notes that you need along the way. So first step is exactly who benefits from hearing your voice. And if I had to say, I would say everybody benefits from hearing your voice. But if you can pick out three, that's your elected leaders. So the people who are right in the legislature right now who need to hear your voice. The community, so the people that you're around, and close connections, your friends, your families, your co-workers, anybody that you interact with is really going to hear and is really going to benefit from hearing your perspective and hearing your wisdom. And there are many ways to share your truth. You can go to the next slide there. The most common ways that you can do that is public testimony and op-eds and LTEs, which people really, really like, and it's really popular. But there's also some other ways, and we'll go into that. You can go to the next one there. So written form, and exactly what is that? That could be anything from committee emails to written testimonies and to op-eds, and we'll go into that later. But there are opportunities for us as constituents to address a specific government agency on a specific piece of legislation. We can jump to the next one. And op-eds and LTEs, or opinion pieces and letters to the editors, are essentially another way for us to connect with a broader base, our communities, our elected leaders, and even people who aren't in our state, to see exactly what's going on. And there is a difference between the two, and I want to just illustrate that. But essentially, opinion pieces are, we would get to write about whatever we want and whatever is important to us, and letters to the editors are pieces that we're writing to target a particular article that a media outlet reported on. So there is really a difference, and you'll definitely want to research whatever media outlet you go to publish your piece, because there are specific guidelines and things you'll want to watch out for, and people you want to know to make sure that your piece is being represented in the best way. We can jump over to the next one there. So public testimony, and boy, do people love themselves a public testimony. And this is a really common, easy, and accessible way for people to connect with their legislature. But there are opportunities for, again, us as the constituents to go and testify in front of a governmental branch or committee about a particular piece of legislation that is going on. And there's two different ways that these can happen. You can do this in person, or you can do it over the phone. And with a lot of hearings that are happening in Juneau at the Capitol building, you'll be definitely doing a teleconference unless you're down there in Juneau or if you want to travel there. And so there'll be some protocol to follow with that. We will talk about that here later. We can jump on to the next one. And we have legislative meetings, and this one is not really known too well, but they're essentially us as constituents. We are going and talking directly with our legislature. And there's two different ways that can happen as well. They can be in the form of lobbying, which a lot of people are familiar with, and that's really a form of advocacy with the intention of getting something done with a piece of legislation. Whereas a constituent meeting, you're just talking directly with your representative or your senator about maybe your experience or something that happened in your community, and there's really not that direct ask of something that's going to happen, but you want to share some information, and that's just as valuable and it's important. And we can jump over to the next one, but the most importantly, exactly when do you get to do these things? So with written forms and op-eds and LTEs, you can do that anytime you want. Anytime that is strategic for you with whatever issue that you are passionate about and working on, in the guidelines of those different media outlets and hearings, whichever works for you. But with public testimonies, there's going to be a notice for those meetings and hearings that you can look and see exactly what works for you, and you can go or you can call into those meetings. And there's a little link at the bottom. We'll drop that in the chat box just in a minute. We can jump to the next one there. So exactly where can you be heard when you're talking to your legislature? So there's really two main ways that you can do that. You can go to your legislative information office, which everybody on this call should know where they are, and if you don't, we'll get you hooked up that way. Or if you're daring and you want to travel all the way down to Juneau, or you happen to be in Juneau right now and you want to go up to the Capitol building, that's the address right there at that bottom on that little card right there. And they will have a notice in the Capitol building to show you where all the different committee hearings are as well. And if you jump to the next one, we come to my favorite part, why this is so important. And I've broken it down into different reasons of why this is important. So civically, when we take this advantage and the initiative to connect directly with our legislators, whether that be with a testimony or an op-ed, we're upholding that transparent process, meaning that we as constituents who have elected leaders are able to be in contact with them, that can talk freely about these issues, that can testify in these issues that are going to impact us. And that in itself sustains a healthy democracy. And in that way, we can hold our leaders accountable for everything that they do, everything that they don't do, and that they can hear from us. And that is extremely important. If you jump to the next one, communally is about the impact that you have with the people around you. When you take that initiative to connect with your leaders about a particular bill or something that's going on, you provide a space for all of the Alaskan voices to be heard. And we know that in our current system that sometimes that's not the case. And there's people who can't travel all the way down to Juneau to testify, that can't call in, that are in rural places that don't have internet and don't know where to go, or they can't testify in fear of their jobs or their livelihoods. And so when you are speaking with that perspective, you're holding that space for them, even if they don't, even if they're not there with you. And that is extremely important to make that process as much more inclusive as possible. And when you do that, that inspires and empowers and mobilizes other people to participate. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people rally and that changes the direction of a bill, or changes a legislator's mind. So it is extremely, extremely important, and you can be inspiring somebody who does not have that ability or is afraid to do that to participate when they're a little bit more comfortable. And most importantly, it creates the narrative that we want to share with other regions, with other people in the lower 48, because they are watching what we're doing and they are listening to what we're saying, and we want to speak for ourselves. So when we take that initiative, when we turn out and we testify, we write an op-ed, we're letting people know exactly what we want to say and how we really feel. And we can jump to the next one. Personally, it allows for your own experience to be shared. Everybody on this webinar and this who's calling in has something that is valuable for a legislator, for their community members to hear and know. And when you share that knowledge, when you're in that space and you can do that, that connects you even more to your elected leaders. They might not know everything. They might not live every life or have every experience. And when you share that, that's going to have a direct impact on the legislation that they're writing and that they're going to be in charge of. And your perspective, like I said, could definitely change the direction of a bill entirely. And so we've talked about a lot about the different ways that we can do it and why it's important, but exactly how do we do these things? We could jump to the next one. For written forms, for like emails and written testimonies, or if you're publishing your piece, you're really going to depend on emails. And if you jump to that link right there at the bottom, half of that card there, that is the link on the state websites for every single committee that does exist right now, and then later is going to exist if you're wanting to set up a meeting. And if you're publishing a piece, you're really going to depend on that media outlets and their different guidelines there, and they'll tell you exactly how to submit that. So you just want to keep in mind that when you are doing these things and you're submitting these requests, that you want to keep email correspondence with everything. Keep a record of your op-ed, of your LTE, keep a record of all those emails, because you never know what could happen, and you definitely want to make sure that everything's going to go correctly. And just like I said, make sure that you're following those guidelines on how to request a meeting and how to publish an op-ed. Provide a short bio, because you do want people to represent you as you and not have them research who you are and then tell other people what you are. You want to represent yourself, so make sure you do that. You can jump to the next one there. So with public testimony, it's pretty simple. Whether that's in person or over the phone, you're going to sign into that testimony sheet, or you're going to tell the person on the other side of the phone your name, address, email, phone number. If you're representing anybody, or if you're just representing yourself, you're going to wait to be called, introduce yourself for the record, and then you testify. Easy peasy. Some key things to remember is that a lot of these hearings and meetings are audio recorded or video recorded. So be aware of that. And if you are introducing yourself and you are not comfortable sharing your full address on record, you can just say, "Hi, I'm Alyssa Quinton. I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska, Senate District 1, and my full address is on record with the clerk." Bam. And you're pretty much good. So you can do that as well. Your testimonies are usually 2 to 3 minutes, depending on what the hearing is. So be concise, be brief, but be confident in what you're saying. And if you mess up and you stutter, that's okay. Just keep on doing what you're doing. Take a breath if you need to. And sometimes they'll even let you reclaim your time if things do get emotional and things like that. We can jump to the next one. With legislative meetings, you're going to be connecting, whether that is with a staff member or a legislator, you're going to be connecting with those people directly. And those 2 links right there are on the state website, where you can find all the contact information for every single representative and senator. So that's going to be a really important resource for you moving on. So we've covered the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And we're going to talk about tips. So these are the things that I've pulled from that I've just learned throughout the process and helping people doing this work. You really want to acknowledge your emotions when you're doing this. It is okay to feel nervous, to be upset, to be excited. And if you're feeling that, and if it's kind of getting in the way of you testifying or writing an op-ed, just understand that that's okay. And that you feel that way because these things are important. And so use that, do what you need to do in order to make yourself successful in whatever you are comfortable doing, and acknowledge that and be proud of that. Understand that that doing these things, writing op-eds, testifying, going to hearings, is a skill, and it takes practice, and nobody is good at it just out the blank. And also, nobody's expecting you to be an expert. Like, you're not there to impress anybody. You're there to be yourself. So just be proud of what you can do now and be excited for all the things that you can do later on. And be your authentic self. You know, like I said, no one's expecting you to be an expert or anything like that. Do exactly what you need to do what you believe in, what you want to do, and that's going to guide you forward. And if you jump to the next one, this is really for connecting your words with action. So when you're writing a piece or you're, if you're writing a piece, you'll definitely want to research and educate yourself just in case. Because you never know when information can change. You never know when a bill can change. So just make sure that you cover your bases. And the same thing with, recognizing where you're at. Find your authentic voice. You want people who are reading your piece to know it's from you. And, you're not there. It's not in exactly what you need to write and however you need to write it, understanding that you're following all of that protocol. So, use our authentic words. The things that you have to say are influential, so use that. And always take precautions and protect your information. So understand that things are being recorded, that things are being kept on record, and that all the different ways that you can protect your information. And so if you want to take, if we have time, we can do a little reflective activity. So this is more just of a reflection for everybody who can see this and hopefully can hear this. We want to take a second and find out exactly what you're passionate about. Everybody in their different regions has things that's important to them, whether that's happening in the legislature or in their city council or assembly. So take that. So just take a good breath and figure out exactly where your mind and your spirit is pulling you to. What is influential to you? What's passionate? What do you care about? And what needs to change in your communities? And why is this so important to you in your community? Who needs to hear your perspective? And who can you potentially work with? And who can share this? And if this is something in the legislature, finding out who those people are, those links that Carly just shared with us, that is a direct link to your legislature right there if you need to talk to a representative. So just be thinking about this as we're moving on. I think that's pretty much all I have. So thank you, everyone, for their time.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Griffin.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Alyssa. That was awesome. And I think a really great summary of some of the skills that you all will need to make a change, whether it's the state legislature or in your own community. My name's Griffin Plush. I am, my pronouns, preferred pronouns are he, him, his. And yeah, I want to take a moment too. I'm down here in Juneau to acknowledge the land of the Tlingit Ani. Specifically here on the UAS campus. This is Aquan territory. So I am a former legislative intern, legislative aide to Representative Jonathan Christ Tompkins, to JKT. He's a representative down here in Sitka, kind of represents rural Southeast, a lot of different communities. And that is part of my my sort of relationship to this training, but I'm also an AIA alum, like Carly and Jody and Kingo, actually. And I am also a board member of the Alaska Center, kind of the youngest board member, or one of the younger board members right now. So anyways, we got a lot of great sort of skills and information over the past little bit, but it's important if you're going to enact any of those skills or kind of lay of the land knowledge to be able to keep up to date and follow the legislative session. So there's the Capitol building, downtown Juneau. And for the next few minutes, we're going to walk through, just really briefly, the legislature's website. So akleg.gov, akleg.gov. This is the front page, right? There's a lot of information here. And I would really encourage you guys after this to go just check it out, see what's happening, check out a lot of these tabs, but I'm just going to walk you through the front right here. So, right, we got the spotlight. This is just a quick little update here of things that are happening. You have the next tab over is the floor calendar. That tells you what the House and Senate on the floor are doing each day when they're all together, voting on bills and introducing guests and things like that. They tend to do it every day or every other day. You can see not really anything happened today. Not anything is happening the next few days, and nothing has really happened in the House too much this legislative session because there is no strong majority. So next we have the daily schedule. This is what Alyssa was pointing out about the notice that is posted. So you see notices for every committee that is meeting. They all have, as you can see here, sessions and sort of presentations from state officials on the budget, on all sorts of things, and occasionally too bills. So you can see there's a shellfish enhancement bill there in Senate Resources. We'll go and look at that in a second. The next tab over, let me go back up to the top, is the meeting. So this tells you like the big picture of all the different meetings that are happening in the legislature at any time. You can see the schedules, you can see audio and video, and that's really helpful for just like checking in really quick and looking at what different committees are doing. And the next, actually, I think we'll go right to and this, we have live now. You can watch what is playing live, right? So just a exciting finance subcommittee. That's part of the budget process. But bills and laws, if we want to go over to that, well, actually the sidebar, right? So there's all sorts of information. You can look at the Senate members, House members. I think you have bills and laws there. And in bills and laws, we're going to go to bills. You just click that, or you can go down, to sponsor summary. You see there's a lot of different ways to sort by bills and kind of look at different bills information. This is one of the most helpful for me, right, is the sponsor summary list. You can navigate to. And this tells you, because often when you read the news, when you hear people talking about the state legislature, you will hear, Representative Clayman is sponsoring this bill. Representative Christ Tompkins is sponsoring this bill. Senator Stevens is sponsoring this bill. And that can, or you might be interested in what your own legislator is doing, what your elected official is doing. This is a great way to find that quickly without having to remember the bill numbers. We're going to go to Stevens there real quick. He's a senator from Senator Stevens from coastal Alaska, kind of a more moderate Republican in the Senate, long time there. And he represents Kodiak in some areas like that. So you can see a lot of information about him here right on his page. But if you go down to the bills that he is sponsoring, again, we have the one that we saw posted for having a hearing, SB 22, Shellfish Enhancement Projects Hatcheries, right? This is kind of a random bill. There's a lot of random bills, kind of random ideas floating out there. And sometimes they're the ones that get a lot of traction. You see this one had a hearing today. It was postponed, actually, because the thing before it went late. That happens sometimes. But you can see the bill history here, right? So this is a bill page. This is kind of an important part. Where the bill's been, right? So it's been referred through a couple different committees. You see these little acronyms. That's Resources and Finance, RES-FIN. And so it goes through the committees in that order, and so that's helpful for you because you can know where you'll need to testify, who you'll need to contact, members of the Senate Resources Committee. So then the next tab over on this bill page, we have the text. That's important. You can check out text of the bill just like that and see, what exactly is it doing. This is a lot of legalese, so it's kind of hard, unless you're really ready to sit down to tell what things are doing sometimes. So I'll show you guys a tool next back on the bill page, and so it's having to do with shellfish, yeah. Next on the bill page, you have a couple different tabs that aren't really helpful for this bill. You can see fiscal notes, doesn't have anything in it right now, really. Amendments doesn't really have anything in it right now because this is an early bill. A lot of bills won't really be populated with anything because it's early in the session. But going to minutes and audio, you see previous hearings, right? So you can see it was heard today or was going to be heard, and that was the one it was going to be in. And then the next tab, this is the really important one, is documents. So this bill, because it was going to have a hearing, and any bill that is going into a hearing has a ton of documents that are collected by committees that are in support of the legislation from different communities that are fiscal notes that tell you how much money that it's going to cost, all sorts of random documents, and this is what your legislators are looking at. If you submit a letter, it'll show up there. But the really helpful thing that we have here is the sponsor statement. Any bill that has gone into a hearing will have a sponsor statement attached in this document section. And that is from the person who sponsored it, and it tells you times they're, highlighting all these things, but the change that they're making in the law isn't, necessarily the truth. You will want to look at opposition letters if that's the case. But this is really helpful for getting a broad idea of what something's doing. If you go back out to the Documents tab, you can see that there's also a sectional, if you want to get into it a little bit more, we don't have to necessarily look at it, but a sectional analysis or sectional like that is also helpful because it tells you what each individual section of a bill does. Great, so we kind of went through that pretty quickly. There's a lot of information. I'd encourage you again to check out this website and find information on your own and kind of type in different bills, look at different people. A lot of stuff won't have that handy information right now because, like Carly said, there is still no organization in the House, and so there are no referrals or no committees or really anything like that for a lot of interesting House bills. But it's a helpful website. And if we go to the next slide here, this is just highlighting a few bills that I think are cool and that also people are talking about a lot. That does not necessarily mean that they will pass or they'll even go anywhere. Because of the committees, things can get stopped at a lot of different points, and you really never know what is going to happen at the end of the day. But generally, you can guess the operating and capital budgets will pass. And that funds state government, so it's kind of important. And these are really dynamic documents. Everyone's going to be talking about them. These aren't going to be out until mid-February, as when the governor has said that he will submit his version of the budget, which is expected to have $1.5 billion in cuts on a budget that's already been cut a lot over the past few years, will likely come out of education. So that's something to watch out for. Next, this is kind of an interesting idea, right? An interesting, exciting idea that Guarantar, and I forget the Senate sponsor, I think Tom Begich. So you have HB 28 is the House version with Representative Guarantar, and SB 26 is the Senate version with Senator Begich. Those are interesting, something I'm keeping an eye out for personally, and are kind of exciting. And then the governor's supplemental PFD, right? This extra funding for the PFD that he is looking to provide is SB 23 and 24. And then any other bills that you see sponsored from the Rules Committee on that sponsor summary page are coming from the governor's office. And so he is pushing those bills, and they have a better chance of moving, and they're important to his sort of agenda, things that Carly highlighted earlier. And then, like I said, there's not really going to be a lot of movement on House bills. So any House bill that you're looking at, it's really a question of, when they get organization, they have a majority for anything to move. And it's dependent on whether more Republicans or more Democrats get a majority to see what bills will move there. Anyways, keep an eye out for the news, though, obviously, and for what else is happening. We can look at the next here. So, like I said, keeping an eye on the news is important. Whether you're reading, in KTOO, ADN, Juneau Empire, these are helpful newspapers, or my preferred way of receiving news really is podcasts. So Alaska News Nightly is a really solid podcast produced by Alaska Public Media that you can listen to every day, kind of like Up First or The Daily if you want to, if you're thinking about podcasts like that for national news. That gives you an update on what's happening. They have a lot of legislative news this time of year. And then if you have Twitter, I would really recommend following and looking at a hashtag AKLEG, hashtag AKLEG. You can find a lot of information, the blow-by-blow as things are happening, especially when the House is in session, when committees are hearing things. You can find a lot of information that you can't find any other way from journalists. Like we see in this screenshot, Tom Hewitt He's a journalist at the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Or no, actually ADN now, I think. I'll have to check that. He is posting things like right away as he's working on the story, so it's kind of helpful. Right, and then the last, and then we have the AK Ledge app. That's the second screenshot you see there. That's a helpful little app. You can kind of just browse, just like the website. It's a little bit more condensed, though, and made for a mobile format to find what's happening. And finally, I want to highlight text alerts. If you get that AK Ledge app, it can help you set it up. But otherwise, on the website, there's a number you can text. On the AK Ledge website, there's a number you can text, and you just text the bill number, and it tells you what is happening with different bills as it happens. It gives you updates, so you can know when a bill that you care about has been scheduled for a hearing. You can see in that screenshot a couple of the PFD bills that I highlighted in the last slide got hearings when I took that screenshot. So yeah. Really helpful things. I would encourage you after this to set up a text alert for one bill that you find. This is like a little homework. Set up a text alert for one bill you find on the AK Ledge website that looks like it might move, so that you can know when to testify on it. And that is my bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Griffin. That's a good reminder for me too to set up some text alerts and download the app. Would you mind just going over real quick how to sign up for the text alert?
Yeah, so as I said, if you go to akledge.gov, you can find at the bottom of the page, it says SMS bill tracking in bold, the very bottom of the home page, and it gives you the number that you can text to get those text alerts. Otherwise, as I said, through the AK Ledge app, if you go to and download the app and then go to Other, you can see that Other tab on the screenshot. You can set up text alerts right from the app, and then it'll open up your texting app and do that.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much, Alyssa and Griffin. If you can give some appreciation for them in the chat box, that would be really great. Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of different ways to get your voice heard this session, and a lot of different ways to be keeping up with news too. And we'd be happy to help you figure out what's the best way for you to get involved. But thank you again to all of our presenters for sharing all of that. I'd like to open it up for a few minutes of Q&A time. If you have a question, can you type it in the chat box on the upper right-hand corner of your screen? If you're calling in too, I'd like to invite you to verbally ask a question if you feel so called to as well. Any questions coming up for people? All right, that either means that we did a really amazing job, or we just threw like so much information at you that you're a little bit bewildered. That's okay. We are going to be around to help you, find out what issues that you want to follow, what's coming up. So we'll be following up with you all with the slides, with the recording as well, the links that we mentioned, and also contact info for all of us too. So feel free to reach out to us. We're around and we're happy to help you out. Just to close it off, I want to introduce a opportunity to come down to Juneau with us. So this is something that we are trying to do in April, but if you'd like a chance to come down to Juneau and speak with your legislator about something that you really care about, I would invite you to reach out to learn more about our lobby day with the Alaska Center. It's going to be happening April 3rd to 5th in Juneau. And we'll be sending out a little bit more detail on what that's about. But especially if you've never been to Juneau, this is a really great chance for you to get some help in getting down there and getting the tools that you need to speak your truth. So I would encourage you all to reach out and sign up for that opportunity. But if we don't have any more questions coming up, I will pass it on to Alyssa to close it out for us. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us. Please feel free to share this recording and these slides with anyone that you know. We're really trying to create more of these resources for nonpartisan voter education and legislative education. Thank you again, and I'll pass it on to Alyssa to close it off for us.
Can you hear me now? Great. I was on mute. Hi, everyone, again. Thank you so much for letting us do our first webinar. This is really exciting. A recording, like Kango mentioned, will be available soon. So if you are a community organizer in your own community and you want to share this out, perfectly acceptable. Be brave and be courageous. Support each other. This is not easy work, and you can't do it alone. So just reach out and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're taking care of others. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll be having some resources there, as well as some events that are happening statewide and other ways that you can get involved. So yeah, thank you again, and everyone have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Night, night.